Anusas chavero umefutas chavero lo yisa. So the Kohen Gadol cannot marry the anusas chavero, person who was raped, who was violated by his friend, umefutas chavero, who was seduced by his friend. We are on Samach Amad Aleph, 6 lines or 7 lines down. So Kohen Gadol cannot marry somebody who is an anus umefuta. What happens if he goes ahead and marries somebody that he shouldn't have married? Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Omer Havlad Chalal. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says that the Vlad is a Chalal, which means that if it's a boy, it's not a Kohen, and if it's a girl, she cannot marry a Kohen. V'chachamim Omrim Havlad Kasher. And Chachamim say a Vlad is Kasher. So again, he married somebody he was not allowed to marry, the Anusas Chavero Mafutas Chavero. We'll have to see why and what the problem would be. According to Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, any children, any subsequent children are considered to be Vlad, are considered to be Halal, and Chachamim say any subsequent children are considered to be Kasher. Amar Afuna Amarav, Halacha Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, the Halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. It's interesting, it says Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, here it says Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. The Halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, which is that the Vlad is a Halal. V'chein Amar Rav Gidul Amarav, Halacha Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Ika Diamre, others say that Rav Gidul Amarav was not coming to say the same thing as Rav Huna Amarav. Again, both of them are in the same, are in the name of Rav. Rather, Rav Gidul Amarav was coming to tell us the reason why the halacha is like Rav Elazar ben Yaakov. Why would the halacha be like Rav Elazar ben Yaakov? Remember, Rav Huna Amarav, my time with Rav Elazar ben Yaakov. Savar la ki Rabbi Elazar, because he holds like Rabbi Elazar. What does Rabbi Elazar say? Rashi, Da'amar likaman panoi haba ala pnuya shelo l'shem ishus. Even if unmarried people have relations not to get married, asa azona v'kaima le'abelav. So since even though she was ones, even though she was mefateh, she is considered to be a zona. Umechai ve'lavin dekahuna have havlad chalal. And if a Kohen marries somebody that's a lav to them, so then the child becomes a halal. So over here, the anus umefata is usher to the Kohen Gadol with a lav of a zona, and therefore, if he marries her and has a kid, the vlad is a halal. Umi savar la kavasei. Is it true that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds like Rabbi Elazar v'hakaimalan? But we know Mishnas Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov kavinaki. There are some people who say a lot and have nothing to say, and there's some people who don't say much and have a lot to say. So Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov was a person who didn't say much, but anything that he said was naki, was clean. We paskin like him. The problem is that if he in fact said this, and he in fact held like Rabbi Elazar, so on one hand he's right because he's kavinaki. On the other hand, v'ilu baha amrav amrav ein halacha k'Rabbi Elazar. So on one hand, if Rabbi Eliezer is kavinaki, it's not possible that he held like Rabbi Elazar, who the halacha is not like him now. Kasha. So it's a good kasha. And therefore, seemingly because of this kasha, we're going to have a different way to learn that really Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, when he says Havlad Chalal, is not because he holds like Rabbi Elazar, because after all, Allah is not necessarily like Rabbi Elazar, and it's not necessarily because she's a zona. So what's the reason that a Kohen Gadol who marries this woman that he's not allowed to marry, an Anusim Mefate, what's the reason that the Vlad is a Chalal? So let's see. Rav Ashi Amar, that what are they arguing about? B'yesh Chalal mechayave asay kamifli. No, they're arguing about something else. They're arguing whether there's Chalal from chayave asay. What's the problem with a Kohen marrying an Anusas Chaver, Mafutas Chaver? Not because she's a zona. Rather, look at the Rashi. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov lo Rabbi Elazar sfir lahu v'lav zona hi v'lo kaima leha belav. What's the problem? Ella ba'aseh dichsiv bisula yikach v'lo be'ula v'lav habal miklal aseh aseh. So what's the problem here? The problem that she's an Anusas Chaver, Mafutas Chaver is not that she's a zona. The problem is that she's not a besula. But the Isser for a Kohen Gadol to marry a Besula, for to marry not a Besula, the Isser is said in the positive sense. Ki im Besula me'amav yikach li'isha. So what's it considered when we learn an inference from a positive commandment, an asay? It's a lav habla miklal asay. It's not a regular lav. We said if there's a lav for a Kohen to marry somebody, so then the kid is a zona. But over here, it's not a lav for him to marry. The kid could be a zona too, but the kid is a halal. In this case, it's not that it's a law for him to marry somebody who's not a besula. It's a bittul asay. The asay is you need to marry a besula. The inference is that you can't marry a girl who's not a besula, but that's not considered a lav. That's a lav which only comes from an inference of an asay. Lav abab miklal asay, and that we treat like an asay. So now he violated an asay. If he violated a lav, everybody agrees the kid is a halal. If he violates an asay, So then what's the status of the kid? So Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov will tell you that even if he violates an assay of taking a girl who's not a besula, the vlad is still a halal. Rav Gidol Amara and Rafuna Amarav will say that, and the Chachamim will say that the vlad is kasher because there is no halal mechayav assay. That's what the machlokes is. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov savar yesh halal mechayav asay. Rabbanan savar in halal mechayav asay. The question is, what's the machlokes? My time with Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. So what's the reason that you would say that there is a halal for mechayav asay? Dichsiv, because the pasuk over there which says that he needs to take a besula by a kohen gadol says almana, ugrusha, vachalala, zona. Can't marry any of these people. An almana, a grusha, a chalala, a zona. Es eile lo yikach, ki im besula me'amav yikach lisha. What's the next pasuk say? V'lo yichalel zaro b'amav. If you do any of these, then your kid is going to be a halal. Akulu, that's how he learns. V'rabbanan eile hifsek ha'inyan. The Rabbanan say, no, the word eile breaks it up. Because again, what do you have in the beginning? Almana ugusha v'chalala zona. Then it says, es eile lo yikach. These you don't take. Yes, ki im besula, you need to take a besula, but the next pasuk which says v'lo yichalel zaro be'amav is only going on the amana gusha v'chalala zona. Yes, he needs to take a besula, but if he doesn't take a besula, then it's not going to be included in v'lo yichalel zaro be'amav. It's not going to be included in the fact that they're going to be a halal.
Do you violate an assay, or you're not mekayim an assay?
If you do what? According to him, when we say lava ba miklala say.
In other words, there's a difference between not being mekayim an assay and violating an assay.
Well, that's lava ba miklala say is an assay. It's a bitul assay. That's what the principle tells us. A lav which comes from an assay of not marrying a basula. So what happens if you take somebody that's not a basula? It's a lav haba miklala say. Is an assay.
In other words, you don't have the same penalty because you're not mekayim.
It's not a lav.
Right.
If it was a lav, so then everybody would agree that she's a halal. The fact that you can say that she's not a halal is because you're only bittul and asay.
But what if you, let's say, don't eat matzah on the Seder night, but you don't eat chametz?
So then you were bittul the asay of eating matzah on the Seder night, but you weren't over the lav of eating chametz. So over here, for Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Amar, so what's Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov going to say? Lamaisa Eila is breaking up the pasuk. So according to him, why in fact does the next pasuk go v'lo yichalel zaro b'amav? Why does that go back and include even a ki'im besula? Eila lema'ute nida. No, the Eila is coming to exclude a nida to tell you that if you're with your wife who's a nida, so then you're not going to be, the vlad is not going to be a halal. Rashi. You need to tell me that, because you might think that just like amano, gushava chalala, and a zonah, that would be lo yichalel zero b'mav, that would be a halal. So to a nida. Eila says no, these are not the nida. Kiman azal hadetanya. Who does the brayso go like that says me eila tosa halal v'iyata so halal mi nida? Kiman Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, like we just said. The kasha is, and we're going to leave it with the kasha. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov nichteve le'ela lebasof. The only problem with this pshat. And again, he had a problem with the last pshat because, after all, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov is kavin naki. How can he pass like Rabbi Elazar, who the halacha is not like here? The problem with this pshat is that according to Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, if in fact v'lo yichalel zaro b'amav is going on the entire pasuk, so then it should say almana ugusha v'chalala zona ubisula, etc., etc., however you want to place it, and then only put v'ela and then exclude the nida at the end. The fact that it breaks up the entire psukim with the nida seems to be separating the lavim and the asay, and seemingly maybe the asay in fact should be different. The Gemara says kashya. You're right, it's a kashya, and it's not galad according to this either. So either way you say, however you want to explain why Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov holds that the vlad is a halal, either way you're going to have a little bit of a kasha. If you say that he holds like Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, that's a kasha because it seems like the halach is not like Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov here. And we say that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is kavinaki, so how can he hold like Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov here? Or even if you say he doesn't hold like Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, and it has nothing to do with the woman being a zona, even if you say it has to do with whether you're bittul the asay or it's a halal mechayav asay, you can have a problem also because the word eila over here seems to be out of place according to him, because if the whole pasuk is coming to go to the next pasuk lo yichalel zero be'amav, then the word eila, which is excluding a nida, seems to be in a weird place in the pasuk to be breaking up the psukim into two.
Is it possible for ladies that nida she should get pregnant?
Right. So it is possible. I mean, nowadays we are machmir and we do the sheva nekiyim. This is the whole shaila that we have, that there are women who look for a kula because they dafka can't get pregnant, because by the time the sheva nekiyim are over, They already lost their whole opportunity. So it's possible to say that while she's menstruating, she might not be able to become pregnant, but this is assuming that after we already have the Shiva Nekiyim, for sure a woman, definitely some women, and again, some women can only become pregnant during the Shiva Nekiyim because their cycle is so short that by the time the Shiva Nekiyim are over, they have problems, and it's one of the major issues. It's infertility sometimes. But this seemingly is not talking about while she's still menstruating. It's talking about the period between the menstruation when she becomes mutter to her husband, but she's still officially, until she goes to a nida, considered, until she goes to the mikveh, considered to be a nida. Excellent question, though. Tanu Rabbanan. Achoso Arusa. So now we have a different case. So there's a case of a sister who is an Arusa. Now, by a Kohen, there are 7 people that a Kohen is allowed to be mitame to when he goes, when they pass away. 7 of his relatives. The question is, so one of them is his sister. The problem is, it's only a sister who is single, not a sister who's married. The question is, what about a sister who's Arusa, who's not married, but not single? Again, nowadays we do both together, but an Arusa was officially, quote-unquote, married without living with her husband yet. She still needed a get if she was going to get divorced. So what's the status of this Arusa, the sister of a Kohen and Arusa who passes away? Do we consider to be married and he can't go to be matame for her, or do we consider to her to still be single, in which case he can be matame for her? So Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Omrim matame la. Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda says that he is matame la, because she's in the category of being single. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Omrim ein metamela. So it's a machlokes whether we're metame for an animal. We'll see both sides. Anusa mefuta diver kol ein metamela. Or anusa and mefuta, everyone agrees you're not metame for her. And we'll see why. Umukas eitz ein metamela di Rabbi Shimon. Everybody agrees that a mukas eitz you are metamela except for Rabbi Shimon. Why? Why does Rabbi Shimon hold that a mukas eitz you can't be metamela? Shay Rabbi Shimon omer reuya lekohen gadol metamela. She'ein reuya Kohen Gadol ein metamila, because he holds that you're only metame for somebody that's roy for a Kohen Gadol, and the mukas eitz is usher to a Kohen Gadol. If she's usher to a Kohen Gadol, so then by definition we assume that she's not a besula. Again, she's the one who had a little bit of eitz inside of her private parts, and therefore she might have lost part of her besulim. So if he's saying that she lost part of her besulim vis-a-vis a Kohen Gadol that he can't marry, so then when it says over here that achosoha besula hakirovai lav asher lo aisa leish lo yitama, so achosoha besula, if she's not considered a besula als a Kohen Gadol, then she's not going to be considered a besula als a Kohen being metame for her. Ubogeres metame la divrei kol adam, and a bogeres is metame. So again, everybody agrees by a bogeres. Almost everyone agrees by a mukas eitz as well that you're metame except for Rabbi Shimon. Everyone agrees that an anus mefuta you're not metame, and they argue by achoso arusa. My time Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda. What's the reason Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda who hold that you are metame for a sister even though she's an arusa? Why is she not considered to be married? Didarshi hachi. And let's just again read the pasuk. Some of you have the pasuk there. The pasuk says, "V'la achoso," to your sister. Ha besula, who's a besula. Ha kirovai love, who's close to you. Asher lo haisol ish, who was never with a man. La yitama, to her you can be metame. To anybody else you can't be. And again, just at first glance, we see that there's a lot of descriptions in the pasuk, and the Gemara is going to go through all the descriptions, trying to figure out what each one is excluding or including. So didarshi hachi. So what do they learn? V'la achoso ha besula, she needs to be a besula. Again, this is telling us what she needs to be in order to be metamela. La chosoa besula prat la anusa mefuta, that she's not a besula. So everybody agrees besula excludes anusa mefuta. Again, it wasn't necessarily with her will. It was seduction, it was rape, but at the end of the day, she's no longer a basula, and therefore he cannot be metame for her. Yachol shani motzi af mukas eitz. So one might think, like we just said, that according to Rabbi Shimon, who has ein ru'el kohen gadol, so one might think that I'm going to get rid of a mukas eitz also, which Rabbi Shimon gets rid of. Talmud lomar, because maybe she's not a basula. Talmud lomar, no, it's only a basula asher lo haisal ish. Misha avayasa al yidei ish, yartzazu she'ein avayasa al yidei ish. It's only a non-besula who became a non-besula from an ish. But if she became a non-besula like a mukas eitz, not from an ish, but from something else, so that's why Asher Lo Aisa Ish comes to clarify that it's not just any besula. It's a besula even if she's no longer quote-unquote a besula, as long as she's still a besula vis-a-vis Asher Lo Aisa Ish. Hakirova. What does it mean that she's close? Lirabo to arusa. So that's where they learn it from. So that's the key one that we need for now. If I ask you why is an arusa, why are you metame for an arusa? Lemaisa, she's married. So it's because hakrova. Look at Rashi. Lirabos es harusa. So why do you need the thing at all? Lemaisa, she's still a basula. She's lo aisela ish. Ve'itzterecha liribuye delo tema. So that you shouldn't say asher lo haisa prat la arusa shahaisa leish dehavaya lashon kiddushin. Because you might have thought that asher lo aizel leish is not just clarifying besula. Asher lo aizel leish would also exclude an arusa because the ma'aseh she is lish. She's an arusa. She's not a fully lish, but she's at least partly lish. Comes along hakrova and clarifies asher lo haisa and says no, lirabo says harusa. See, the Gemara in general, Gemara is confusing, but it's beautiful because if you just read Chumash without Gemara, so that's where the Stukim, that's where just everything gets so unclear. Here it's like every word is mamish meaning something. So hakrova, even though from asher lo haisa ish you might think to exclude and say a Kohen cannot be matami for an arusa, no, hakrova includes an arusa. A lav lirabot habogeret, and a lav includes a bogeret as well, who you may have thought would not be able to be matami la. Hi lama likra. So the Gemara says, I've understood everything else. What you're having was, why do you need a crop for bogeres? What's the havmina that you couldn't be mitame for a bogeres? Rabbi Meir besula afilu mixas besula mashma. That even if she's a bogeres, because again a bogeres we assume that maybe she started losing some of her besulim because as she gets older she loses some of her besulim. But we know that Rabbi Meir says besula is even mixas besula mashma. That in the beginning of the pasuk when it says that if she's a besula, that means even if she has some of the besulim. So what's the hamina that a bogeres wouldn't be okay? It's the reich. Sal chadaita chamina neilaf besula besula mehasam. I might have thought that the word besula in this pasuk, when it says about who you're allowed to be metame when you're a kohen, so your sister needs to be a besula, it might be the same definition as besula by a anus mefuta. What's that? Mala halanara afkanami nara. I might thought that over here it's only a nara, just like anus mefuta, the whole penalty and the whole din you have to marry her is only when she's a nara. So I might think over here when it says besula, it's dafka nara to exclude a bogeres who's no longer considered to be a besula, just like she's not considered to be a besula when it comes to the case of anus mefuta. Kamash malan, I need the word elav to tell me no. Even if she becomes a bogeres and she's single, so then you're allowed to be metame la. Beautiful. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, maitamai. So now we need to see the other side, because obviously, if they use the word krova lirabot ha'arusa, if the last opinion used krova to tell me that you're metame even for an arusa, clearly the one who says that you're not metame for an arusa, they're going to hold that krova is not learned to include an arusa. So how are they going to learn everything else? So let's see. Darshi hachi, they learn vela achosoha bisula prat la anusa mefuta umuchas eitz. Because again, Rabbi Shimon's the only one who excluded a mukas eitz. Rabbi Shimon's the only one who says you can't be matayim for mukas eitz. They say vela achosoha bisula prat la anusa umefuta umuchas eitz. 1 second. So over here, it seems that the Gemara is saying that according to Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon, a mukad eitz would actually be excluded. That you cannot be metame for a mukas eitz. And we're going to have to see exactly, as the Gemara will see on the next DAF, if Rabbi Yossi agrees with Rabbi Shimon. Again, you see what I'm saying? In the beginning it said that only Rabbi Shimon holds that a mukas eitz are not metamila. Over here it's saying, what's the reason of Rabbi Yossi v. Rabbi Shimon? So it seems like it's saying, v'lachosoa besula prat la anusa umefuta. That everybody agrees to. But umukas eitz. That seems to be implying that a muchas eitz would not be metamila either. That's like Rabbi Shimon. That's not like necessarily Rabbi Yossi. But the Gemara seems to be learning here that Rabbi Yossi would agree with Rabbi Shimon, and he would be his partner in crime also by a muchas eitz. Asher lo haisa, she wasn't for an ish. So what's that? Asher lo haisa ish. That would be prat la arusa. So that excludes an arusa. Because again, what did the first way learn? Asher lo haisa ish learned dafka a muchas eitz. The first pshat learned that a mukas eitz would not be excluded, and you would be metamila because she was lo haisa ish. Even though she's not necessarily a full besula, she's lo haisa ish. No. Over here it's saying, asher lo haisa pra la arusa. How are they learning here? They're learning, just like Rashi told us before, that this excludes an arusa because an arusa was ish. So if I ask you, again, just for our purposes, if I ask you, what's the machlokes? Achoso arusa. Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda would say you're still metamela because you have the word krova. According to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, you're not metame la because asher lo haisa ish is par larusa. Why can't I use hakrova to bring her back into the picture? Because hakrova l'rabas arusa sheniz garsha. I need krova for something else. Even though an arusa you're not metame la, an arusa who then gets divorced before she's married, they agree you are metame la. Very interesting. A lav they agree l'rabas es habogeres. Okay. So it comes out again that Hakrova, according to the first opinion, Hakrova Dafka tells us that in Arusa you are Mitamela, because she's still considered Hakrova. According to the second opinion, no. Asher Lo Haisa excludes in Arusa. So what does Hakrova teach me? That you're right. In Arusa you can't be Mitamela, but in Arusa who gets divorced you can be Mitamela. Okay. Hakrova L'Rabos Arusa Shenizgarsha. Now let's clarify this opinion. So the one who holds, the second opinion who holds L'Rabos Arusa Nishgarsha. Again, according to the first opinion, we don't need Hakrova to include an Arusa Shenizgarsha because what? Even a regular Arusa you're allowed to be Metamila. Kavachomer, an Arusa Shenizgarsha you're allowed to be Metamila. The second opinion needs Hakrova to tell you that you're allowed to be Metame for an Arusa Shenizgarsha because they hold that a regular Arusa you're not allowed to be Metamila because Asher Lo Aisal Ish. Good?
When it's all the same loss as someone who can come back and eat truma in her father's house. In other words, whoever has that status that can come and eat truma in her father's house should be the same laws for here.
It should be, but again, we're working off of the Gzeir Shah. We're working off of the words in the psukim. But theoretically, if the words no psukim, then one might draw the connection to eating whoever returns to eat truma in her father's house. Hakrova lirabod arusa shenizgarsha. Hakrova, according to the second opinion, tells me that in Arusa Shenizgarsha you can be Metamila. How's that possible? Rabbi Shimon says, Ru'uya l'kohen gadol Metamila, she'en Ru'uya l'kohen gadol Metamila. We just finished saying that you're only Metame, according to Rabbi Shimon. And again, it wouldn't be a problem if this wasn't Rabbi Shimon, then we would just say that he argues on him. But this is Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon himself holds that you're only Metame to somebody who a kohen gadol can marry. A kohen gadol cannot marry in Arusa Shenizgarsha. Why? Because she's Nisgarsha. So how can you tell me that this pasuk is coming to tell me that Arusa Nisgarsha is fine? Lamaisa, if she can't marry Kohen Gadol, she shouldn't be able to be Metamela. Shani Hasam Dirabi Rachman Hakrova. You're right. Really, she shouldn't be. That's why I need Hakrova. Because if I didn't have Hakrova, so then whatever the din is by a Kohen Gadol, the din is over here. Hakrova tells me that even though you're right, a Kohen Gadol cannot marry an Arusa Shenizgarsha, Hakrova tells me that nevertheless, her brother can be Metamela when she dies. Okay, it's only one problem. Ihachi mukas eitz nami. If this is so then you should tell me a mukas eitz too. In terms of, basically, if you tell me that mukas eitz is excluded, v'la'achosoa b'sula, so why don't you tell me that muchas eitz should be included as well? Why don't we say that no, muchas eitz seemingly would be excluded, but Hakrova tells me that a muchas eitz you can be metamela. Why are you only telling me that a arusa shenizgarsha can be metamela? Both of them have reasons that you shouldn't be metamela. So why are you telling me that Hakrova includes arusa shenizgarsha? No, maybe you should tell me that a muchas eitz you can also marry because of Hakrova. Why do you choose that one and not this one? Ihachi muchas eitz nami Rabbi krova achas v'lo shtayim. No, Krova can only tell us one. What's the obvious question? Why that one and not this one? Umayra Isa. So the Gemara gives an interesting answer. Ha'is abed ba'maisa, ha'lo is abed ba'maisa. That a mukas eitz had something sustained to her body. There was a material change in her body. So even though theoretically you might have thought that Krova should come and include her and you're allowed to be Metamer, since she had something done to her body, she's the sister of the Kohen, but she's a different sister because her body changed a little bit now that there was a Mukas Eitz. So there, we're not going to be able to be Metamela. But at Arusa Shenizgarsha, where nothing happened to her body, she just happened to have gotten divorced, so you shouldn't be able to be Metamela because a Kohen Gadol can't marry her. Comes Krova, and if you're only going to be able to include one of them, so Krova is going to include an Arusa Shenizgarsha. For Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Yossi, again, Midishaf Gela Bar Zuge, he left his partner in crime. Because again, he left Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yossi are the ones who said in the beginning that ain't metamela for an arusa. But then when it was Rabbi Shimon, when it came to Mukas Eitz, it was only Rabbi Shimon. And again, this seems to prove that when the Gemara over here says V'la'chosoa b'sula prat la'anusa u'mefuta u'mukas eitz, that's not really Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon. The rest of the drasha is, but that specific idea of V'la'chosoa b'sula, seemingly it's clear from this Gemara that Rabbi Yossi does not agree with Rabbi Shimon by mukas eitz. And again, that's a pashtus in the Gemara, because the Gemara said everybody says ein metamila, everybody says metamila except for Rabbi Shimon. So even though again he was his partner in crime by an arusa where he says ein metamila, seemingly he agreed with everyone else that by a mukas eitz it would be metamila. And when it says V'la'chosoa b'sula, Rabbi Yossi will tell me no. Mukas eitz is not excluded from V'la'chosoa b'sula. So the question is, Rabbi Yossi mideshafke lebar zuge, he left his partner in crime. Miklal de mukas eitz k'Rabbi Meir sfirale. Fine. Minale though, where does he know that from? What's the problem? Why is there a problem? Because where did the other, go back a second, where did the other opinion learn that a mukas eitz is going to be excluded? Asher lo haisal ish. Right? The first opinion said Asher lo haisal ish means that what? Dafka ish. However, mukas eitz will be okay. What's the problem with Rabbi Yossi learning like that? Because what does he learn Asher lo haisal ish for? What does he learn it for? Prat la arusa. He learns it for the very thing that we're coming with the whole machlokes for. Asher lo haisal ish, prat la arusa, who is ish. So you can't tell me you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you want to hold like Rabbi Shimon across the board, so then the lachos bisula will exclude a mukas eitz. But if you're telling me that a mukas eitz you can be metame la, the only way you know that you can be metame la is because Asher lo haisal ish, according to the first opinion. But Asher lo haisal ish, you in the second opinion are using to tell me that you can't be metame for an arusa. So how does he learn it? So there's always a way out. How does he learn it? So he says, it says milo haisal ish afikte, but you already used it. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Chad mi lo haisal v'chad mi ish. No. The first opinion learned it from lo haisal ish. That's probably mukas eitz. He's saying lo haisal, you learn one thing. Lo haisal, Rashi says, mi lo haisal, you can learn lahotzias arusa, but mi leish lemishrei mukas eitz. So again, it comes out that Rabbi Shimon's the only one who holds by mukas eitz you can't be metamila. Rabbi Yossi holds like everybody else at mukas eitz you can be metamila, but he needs to learn it from a different word because just like they were able to learn it from Asher lo haisal ish, he can't learn it from Asher lo haisal ish because he learns that you can't be metame to an arusa mishal lo haisal ish, and therefore he needs to split up lo haisal ish mi lo haisal. You learn that you can't marry an arusa, you can't be metame for an arusa, and lish is that you can be metame for a mukas eitz. Beautiful, very glatt. Okay, a lav. Everybody says a lav l'rabot habogeret. So again, everybody agreed. Umegara motame la divrei kol adam. We said everybody agrees that a bogeret, a lav, you're allowed to go ahead and be metame bogeret. The question is, what was a havamina? So we said the havamina was that besula mixas besula mashma, etc., etc. Afkanara, malahal nar afkanara, kamash malan, that you learn it differently, and that it's not a besula dafka who is a nara, even a besula who is a bogeres. But the Gemara asks over here, a lav l'rabos habogeres. The problem is we have a problem. Besula shlema mashma. Then when it says the word besula, you're allowed to be metame for a besula. We know elsewhere that besula means a full besula. So the Gemara says, no, you're getting it wrong. Taima didei nami hasamehacha. The darish hachi midei lav l'rabos habogeres miklal de besula shlema mashma. You only have a kasha if you assume that the law, right? You basically have two rules here. One of them says that when it says besula, that means a besula shlema. One of them says that when it says a lav, it includes a bogeres. But Lamai says she's not a besula shlema. So how's it possible that it's so? It says it depends which law you learn first. If you learn besula shlema mashma, so then I understand what the problem is with the bogeres because it's not a besula shlema. But he's saying over here that if you learn a lav first, then I only know the rule of besula shlema mashma from here. That means if it didn't say anything, if it didn't say Asher lo haisal v'lachosah besula kirova elav, so what would I think? I would think that a bogeres is part of a besula. Why are you telling me that a bogeres is a lav? Why are you telling me that I need a special rule for bogeres? It must be that in general a besula is a besula shlema mashma. I over here, she's not a besula shlema. I have the word a lav. Again, it sounds confusing, but it's just basically saying which one came first. So the Gemara is saying that the drasha of a lav came first. The drasha is saying that a lav tells me that you can be metame for a bogeres. Why do you need to tell me that you can be metame la for why do you need a special word to tell me that you can be metame for a bogeres? Lamaisa she's a besula. It's clear from the fact that there's a special word of a lav to tell me that you can be metame for a bogeres that when it says besula, it means besula shlema mashma. And if you just had besula without a lav, it's clear that you would say that you cannot be metame for a bogeres because she's not a besula shlema. Comes along a lav and says you can't be metame for bogeres. That teaches me that in general when it says the word besula, it means dafka besula shlema. I over here, why are you allowed to be metame for bogeres? Not because of besula shlema mashma. Because you have the word a lav, you can be metame for a bogeres. Okay.
Besula shlema only a concept by a Kohen Gadol. It's the only place that we have this distinction.
Interesting. The Gemara seems to be learning it here that when it says besula by being metame la, that it would include over here. That whatever is by, and that seems to be going like Rabbi Shimon maybe. Ruya Kohen Gadol would be metame la by Kohen as well. Okay, we have a few more minutes, so let's see a new case. Tanya, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer Giores bechusa mi bashol shanim v'yom echad keshera lekahuna. That if there is a giores, a girl who converts, and again, you said this can never be halacha l'maaseh. It can be halacha l'maaseh because at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily mean that he married her when she was under 3. It means that she converted when she was under 3. She could be 21 now, and it's just a question of when she converted. And I'm sure that people may have dealt with this situation. So Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai,
can a person under 3 years old convert?
that's a shayla. If she converts, I guess, if she has, I don't know all the halacha l'maaseh, but the question would be if she has to be mekabel mitzvahs later when she becomes older, if she's converting, if she's converting agav her mother, etc. So that's a whole discussion. But over here, I'm just pointing out that it is possible that you're marrying a girl who's 21 and she converted when she was between 0 and 3. So Gioris bechusa mibas shalosh shanim v'yom echad keshera lekahuna. A Gioris who converts under 3 in a day, so let's just say 3 years old and younger, so she's kasher lekahuna. Shenemar v'chol atav b'nashim asher ledu mishkav zachar hechayu lachem v'rei pinchas imahen. So let's just see for a second. Let's see Rashi for a second. What would be the problem with her being kasher lekahuna? Why would you think that a Gioris is not kasher lekahuna? Rashi, keshera lekahuna, lo mechaskinan la kizona. We don't assume that she's a zona. Because again, a kahuna, a kohen, cannot take a zona. We assume, unfortunately, we have to assume that every non-Jew over the age of 3 has had bia, and therefore she's considered to be a zona. Why don't we assume that a girl under 3 has bia too? We might assume that, as crazy as it sounds, but we know that halachically a bia with a girl under 3 is not considered to be a bia because her besulim come back. So if she converts under the age of 3, even if for whatever reason, as sick as it sounds, she had bia under 3, at the end of the day, halachically, that's not considered a bia. So therefore, Gioras bechutz m'bashol sham v'yom echad is keshera lekahuna, because she's not considered to be a zona, even if she had bia, because l'maaseh, it's not considered a bia for halachic purposes. Shenemar, why is it okay? V'chol hataf b'nashim asher le'yadu mishkav zachar hechayu lachem. What's the basis of this? Well, where's this pasuk talking about? This pasuk is talking about when they captured Midian. So when they captured Midian, so Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Jewish people, all of the taf, all of the kids who are nashim, all of the baby girls, asher lo yadu mishkav zachar, who have never had relations, hechayu lachem, you should keep alive lachem, and we learn lachem means that you can take them as wives. V'harei pinchas imahem. And we know that Pinchas was one of Bnei Israel. He was Lachem. He was a Kohen. And if you're saying that you're allowed to take these girls as wives, so it's clear that what? The Taf bin Hashim, Asher Liyadu Mishkav Zachar. So it's clear that a Gioris under 3 is Kasher Laguna. Now we're going to see in a second it's not so clear, because what does the Pasuk say? The Pasuk just says that she didn't have relations. The Pasuk doesn't say anything about under 3 and over 3. But the Gemara is learning from here that when they gave them permission to be with the girls from Midian, it's talking about girls who are under 3. And we see that Pinchas is allowed because, again, they're going to be Megayer now. These girls are not going to stay Midianites. They're going to become Jews, and then you're going to marry them. So we see from here that since they were allowed to marry a Kohen, Pinchas was allowed to marry these girls as long as they were under 3, once they were Megayer. So you learn from here that you're allowed to marry, a Kohen's allowed to marry a girl and be with a girl who is Megayer under 3. V'Rabbanan, so how do the Rabbanan argue? La'avadim v'l'shvachos. No, lachem doesn't mean you can take them as wives. It means you can take them as your maids and as your avadim. Fine. Ihachi, if it's true, bas shalosh shanim v'yom echad nami. So the Gemara asks a great question. If it's true that you're learning from this pasuk, so then you should be able to take them even over 3. Why? Look at Rashi. Bas shalosh shanim nami. Litz gasher l'Rebbe Shimon. Why? Uvilvat shelo tehei nevelas. Because again, the pasuk doesn't say anything about 3. It just says asher lo aisel ish dehakra anivalahu dekakapidlei. All that the crowd matters is anivala ukaamar kol she'ei nivelas hachayu lachem. So if you're learning from this pasuk, so then you should have the rule that a Kohen can take a Giores as long as the Giores never had Bia before. Again, how are you going to figure that out? It's not going to be so easy. But as long as a Gioris never had Bia before, you should be able to take it. Where do you get this whole idea of 3 from? So the Gemara says, Kid de Rav Huna. We learn from Rav Huna. To Rav Huna Ramiksiv. Rav Huna brings a little bit of a problem with these psukim. Because the pasuk before this says, V'ata hirgu kol zachar bitaf. You need to kill every single male and the male children. However, v'chol isha yodas ish lemishkav zachar haragu. So the Gemara says, Ha'ena yodas kaimu. What does that imply? The first pasuk says you need to kill all of the men, and any isha who had relations. What does that imply? That an isha who never had relations, kimu, even though she's an isha and not a baby. So the first pasuk implies that you could take any isha, even if she's 30 years old, as long as she didn't have relations. Miklal dehatav bein yadu bein lo yadu kamu. That implies that an isha who's 30 years old, who never had relations, you can take. A taf, you can take whether they had relations or not. I could have said another. You can make another inference from here. You can also make the inference that you could take any woman. You could take any woman who's yodas ish. And then when it says v'chol ataf min Hashem asher lo yadu mishkav zachar, that by itself just contradicts, because that seems to be saying that the kids only asher lo yadu, but it's only kids. But the Gemara is saying that any woman, and that implies that kids you could take bein yadu, bein lo yadu. Uchsiv v'chol ataf min Hashem asher lo yadu mishkav zachar hachayu lachem hayadi harogu. The second pasuk implies that the taf who were yadu, even if they're young, so you have to kill them. Have omer, so it makes a lot of sense if you learn like this. That what bireuya li ba'el akasim medaver. No. The pasuk is not talking about whether they had relations or whether they didn't have relations. Again, that would be very difficult to tell. Not that it'll be so easy to tell who's 3 and not who's not 3, as we'll see in a second. But what does the pasuk mean in the first pasuk when it says v'chol isha yodas ish l'mishkav zachar? It doesn't mean any woman who had relations. Any woman who's fit to have relations. What does it mean? You're fit to have relations? You're 3 years old. Because again, halachic bia, fit to have relations. Halachically, you're 3 years old. So the first pasuk is not a contradiction. The first pasuk says v'chol isha yodas ish l'mishkav zachar ragu. Kill anybody who is ra'i l'bia. V'chol ataf min Hashem asher lo yadu mishkav zachar. Any baby who's not royal libya, who's under 3, so there you're allowed to take lachem, you can marry. Tanya nami hachi v'chol isha yodas ish bireuya liba lakasim medaber ata omer bireuya liba lo eino ela niva lamamish kisho omer v'chol ataf min Hashem asher lo yadu mishkav zachar have omer bireuya liba lakasim medaber. Now the Gemara is going to ask the famous question: Mina yadi. Very nice. Maybe the mothers knew, but how are we supposed to know when we're looking at all these girls from Midian? How do we know which ones are 3 and which ones are very mature 3-year-olds and there are not so mature 3-year-olds? So how are they supposed to know who's 3 and who's not? So obviously they needed the secret weapon. Amar of Huna bar Bizna, Amar of Shimon Chasida, Havirum lifnei hatzitz. They put them in front of the golden plate, which was on the forehead of the Kohen Gadol. Kol shepaneha morikos. This is the beginning of jaundice. Anybody whose paneha became jaundice, bi'adua shehu ruyali baal. If her face turned yellow, that means that she's 3 years old and she's royally bal and you killed her. If her face didn't turn yellow, that means that she's 3 years old or under and you can take them lachem. Amar Rav Nachman siman la'avera hidrokin. He says similarly that the siman la'avera was hidrokin and the pnein shel ovre avera would turn to a yellow. Kayotze bedavrata motze.
Did the Kohen need to be wearing it at the time or just hold the...
I'm not sure. Seemingly, right.
I thought it was Moshe.
Seemingly, it would have been Moshe probably, and he probably was not wearing. Right.
He said whether or not.
Right. Seemingly, it might have just been the tzitz without wearing it on the Kohen Gadol. Kayotze bedavar ata omer. So you see a similar thing, not necessarily a similar thing with Ataf ben Hashem and Huya, etc. We'll see in a second. It's not necessarily going to be the tzitz. By Yimtzeu, is anybody familiar with the case of Pilagesh Begiva? There's a story of Pilagesh Begiva where the men of Binyamin assaulted a Pilagesh and they wouldn't give over the criminals. They wouldn't give over their own people in Binyamin who had done the assault. So what happened? So they said, no one's going to give their daughter to the tribe of Binyamin. There was a civil war, and they started killing out all the people in Binyamin. What happened, though?
600 left.
There were no people left.
600.
There were only 600 left. You're learning Pilagesh Begiva now? So there were only 600 left. So what did they decide? They decided that they're going to give the woman of Yavesh Gilad, these Jews of Yoshua Yavesh Gilad, who had never cohabited, they were going to give them over, and they're going to kill the rest of them. So they found 400 Na'ara Basulas. These are not kids. So they found 400 Na'ara Basulas who had never been with a man. And again, obviously over here, it doesn't mean Asher Lo Yadu Ish. This doesn't mean Roy Labia, not Roy Labia. That's not what it means. Over here, it means Mamish that they didn't have beer. So now the question is, how do you tell if somebody had beer or not? Wild Gemara. Mina Yadi, how do you know if somebody had beer or not when you want to do it? So again, that's where this is a correlation. It brings in this case because you want to know something that you can't know. So in our case, you want to know who's 3. In this case, you want to know who had beer. Amar Afgahano, Shivam al Pichavish al Yain. They made them stand on top of a barrel of wine. Be'ula Reicha Nodef, Besula Ein Reicha Nodef. If you were Be'ula, so when you would let out a fresh breath of air, so your mouth would smell like wine, because the wine would come up through the bottom, through your body, and come out of your mouth. If you were a basula and it was blocked, so then you wouldn't necessarily do that. Okay, I wouldn't have ever thought of this, and don't try it at home. But be'ula recha neodef basula ein recha nodef. Fascinating. Only the Gemara can say such a thing. But that's how they used to tell. They would put her al pi chavesh shel yayin, and the beula was reicha nodef and besula ein reicha nodef. Fascinating. V'navrinu lifnei tzitz. So Gemara says, why didn't they do what they did over there by Midyan? Why didn't they just put them in front of the tzitz? It sounds a little bit more sneus, I guess we would say. Amar of Kahana Breder of Nasin liratson lahem ksiv, because by the tzitz, when you look at the pasuk of the tzitz, vayam meitzachar v'nasaron esavona kadashim asher agdish b'nei Yisrael l'chol manas kashem vayam mitzcho tamid. The point of the tzitz is liratson, to find people favorable. Over here, we ain't finding anybody favorable. What are we using the tzitz for? To decide who's going to get killed. So the Gemara says, L'ratzon lahem ksiv, l'ratzon v'lo leporanus. Ihachi b'minyan nami. So how they use it by minyan? They were trying to figure out who's going to get killed by midyan. Ravashi lahem ksiv, lahem l'ratzon v'lo leporanus, u'lo ovdei kochav mafiul leporanus. For Jews, we only use it tzitz l'ratzon. But if we're going to use it to find out who gets killed, we're not going to use it. By the midyanim, we can use it tzitz even to find out who gets killed. Amar of Yaakov Aridi, Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, halacha Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. The halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, who holds that a kohen is allowed to marry a giores who is under 3 years old. Amalei Reb Zera Rabbi Yaakov Aridi beperish shmielacha or miklala shmielacha. Did he tell you this straight out, or did you infer it from something that he said? There's two ways to know that somebody said something. Either they tell it to you, which is always a better way to know it, or the other way is that he says something. He says this. It must be that. I just have to share with you. I'm sorry for 1 second. There's a famous joke. The difference between a yeshiva bacher and a guy who just learns stam. So a guy who learns chumash, a regular guy, you ask him, how do you know Moshe and Aaron are brothers? Because it says in the Torah, Moshe and Aaron are brothers. How do you ask a yeshiva bacher, Moshe and Aaron are brothers? Well, he never learned chumash before. Nobody learns chumash. He just learned Gemara. How do you know Moshe and Aaron are brothers? It infers because in the Ksos, it once brings a case where Moshe lent money to his brother Aaron, and if it says that he uses Moshe and Aaron as the example of people that lend money to his brother, it must be that Moshe and Aaron are brothers. So that's a yeshiva bacher knows that Moshe and Aaron are brothers. Okay. Lamaitz, unfortunately, it's only funny because it's true. My klala. What is the klal? So the question is, beperish shmielacha or miklala shmielacha. The question is, what would the klal be? What did he hear that he would have inferred from, or did he hear it straight? So he's going to answer that he heard it straight, but we're going to find out what the klal would have been. What did he hear that he might have been able to infer from what he heard, that the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, you're allowed to marry a girl, a giores, who is megayer under 3. Rabbi Shimon ben Levi, there was a city in Eretz Yisrael where there was a big protest, and they wanted to claim that everybody in the city is puzzle. V'shige Rabbi es Rabbi Romnos ubatka, and they sent Rabbi Romnitz to go check out what's going on in the city. Matzabam, we'll take out the word bas, even though they don't take it out. It seems to be for our discussion. We're talking about a giores. It doesn't seem to be a bas giores. Umatzaba, if you want to put in parentheses, giores pechusa mi bas shalosh shanim v'yom echad. They found a giores who was less than 3 years old. V'hechshira Rabbi lekahuna. So what happened here? There was a case of a kohen who married a giores who was less than 3. And over time, everybody, like in Toronto, that I'm finding out, everybody's related over here. So in this city over there, everybody was related to this original kohen who married a giores under 3. So, according to the people who held that a kohen's not allowed to marry a giores under 3, all of a sudden the entire city is puzzle. So they went to check it out, and what did they say? V'hechshira Rabbi lekahuna. So again, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi tells over this story. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi tells over the story of a kohen who married a giores, and Rabbi says that the entire city is kosher. What does that imply if he's telling over this story? That implies that he holds, like the story, that a kohen who marries a giores under 3 is good. You're right, you can imply that from the fact that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi told over the story, but at the end of the day, I heard from Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi's mouth himself that says, Allah is like Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, that a kohen is allowed to marry a giores under 3. The question of the Gemara is, okay, let's say he would have learned it from a klal. Would it have been a problem? You're implying, no, I dafka heard it from his mouth. But miklala sounds like it would have been a good thing. It would have been a good inference. So might if he told over the story of a kohen who married a giores and Rabbi said that the whole city is fine, seemingly if Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi told over that story, it seems to imply that he agrees with that. What would be wrong with learning it as an inference? Dilma shani hasam hoel ve'insiv. Because if you would have just got the inference, you might have said that he held, and maybe Rabbi Rumnis held, that you're right. B'di'evet, after the fact, if a kohen marries a giores under 3, then everybody's going to be kosher. But lechatchila, maybe you could infer that lechatchila you can do it. Shmiela, you heard it from his mouth that even lechatchila it's fine. What would be the problem? Why would you think that b'di'evet it would be? We have a case where we see that a bogeres and a mukaseh should not marry a kohen gadol, but if he marries her after the fact, it's not so. So maybe over here too, if you would have learned in miklala, you could have only learned that b'di'evet it's okay, but lechatchila you wouldn't have known, and therefore it's a good thing that you heard it straight from his mouth. The Gemara says no, hachi hashta, you could have learned it from the klal also, because what? Bishlama hasam sofa lios bogeres tachtav, sofa lios bula tachtav. I understand over there why after the fact it's okay, because if he marries a bogeres, he's not allowed to marry a bogeres, a kohen gadol. He's not not allowed to marry a muchasetz for the reasons that we mentioned. Why would it be okay b'diavad? Because Lamaisa, she's eventually going to become a bogeres while she's married to him, and eventually she's going to lose her besulim while she's married to him because she's going to have bio with him. Hacha sofa lio zona tachtav. But you wouldn't say the same thing in this case, which means that there's no reason to say that b'diavad, a Kohen who marries a Giores who's under 3, if you hold that lichatchila, that's usher, because she's considered to be a zona 2, there's no reason to say that b'diavad it should be okay. So if you say that b'diavad it's okay, then you must hold that lichatchila it's okay as well. And therefore, all we're saying here is that you could have learned it either from the inference, the fact that they said that the entire city was okay, you could have learned it from there, or you could learn it from the fact that you heard it straight from his mouth. It happens to be that you heard it straight from his mouth. Let's just end with a story. Rav Sifra learned it originally from the klala. They asked the kashya, and they answered it this way. So he just learned it a little bit of a different way. He learned it the same way, just in a little bit of a different order. It wasn't beperishid, it was miklala, and they asked the kashya, and they answered it. So again, he either learned it from the klal, or he learned it beperish, but at the end of the day, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi definitely said that Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, the law is like Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, and a Kohen can marry a Giores under 3. Hahu kahana de insiv Giores. There was obviously other people who argued. And the story is a case of somebody who argued. Hahu kahana de insiv Giores bechutz mi bashal shanim yom echad. Amalei Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, my hi. What do you think you're doing? Amalei de Amar Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi, Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Allah Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. What do you mean? Rabbi Shua ben Levi says, Allah is like Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. I'm allowed to marry a girl under 3. Amalei zil apik. I don't think so. You got to go ahead and divorce her. It's not okay. V'ilo, and if you don't, mafikna lecha Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi me onech. I'm going to remove Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi from your ear. If you don't divorce her, I will put you into Chaim and force you to divorce her. So again, even though we proved that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi heard from Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, he either heard or he inferred, like Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, that the law is like Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, that a Giores bechusim b'ashal shanim yom echad is ksher lekahuna. There are clearly those who argue and say that a Giores bechusim b'ashal shanim yom echad is not kosher lekahuna, even b'diavad, because again we said there's no reason that b'diavad should be any different than lechatchila. So much so that if he threatened that if he doesn't divorce her, then he will throw him into Chaim. Have a wonderful day.